All right, let's dive into AJAX. We're going to talk about what it is, why it was such a massive game changer for the web, and how, honestly, its core ideas are still running pretty much everything you do online today. Do you remember this? Back in the day, every single time you clicked something on a website, the whole page had to reload. The screen would go white, you'd see that little loading icon, and you'd just wait. It was this clunky, stop-and-wait experience that made the web feel so different from a snappy desktop app. So, the huge shift, the real before and after moment, boils down to one key idea: moving from synchronous to asynchronous. Think of it this way. The old model made you, the user, wait in line for the server. The AJAX model, it lets the browsers sneak off, talk to the server in the background, all while you keep doing your thing. No more wait. And here's what that old synchronous model looked like. You, the user, do something. That triggers a request straight to the server. And then, nothing. Your browser is just frozen, waiting for a response. The entire interface is locked up until the server sends back a whole new HTML page. It's a very rigid, one thing at a time process. AJAX flipped that script entirely by sticking this little AJAX engine right inside the browser. Now, when you interact with the page, you're not shouting directly at the server anymore. You're talking to this engine. And the engine figures out if it needs to go get something from the server, and if it does, it handles all of that quietly in the background, leaving you free to keep using the app. Putting them side by side like this really makes it click, doesn't it? On the left, you've got that strict stop-and-wait sequence, but on the right, with AJAX, you've created this whole new parallel track. The user can keep clicking and typing, completely unaware that the engine is having its own separate conversation with the server. And the application that made everyone sit up and take notice was, of course, Google Maps. For the very first time, you could just grab the map and drag it. There was no submit button, no page refresh, no flash of a white screen. It just worked like magic. You could zoom in, and instead of the whole page reloading, the app would just seamlessly fetch only the new map tiles it needed for that specific view. It was incredibly smooth. Every little interaction felt instant, and that's because this AJAX engine was just grabbing tiny little pieces of data as you needed them, not reloading the entire application every single time. This was the moment the web stopped feeling like a book and started feeling like a real piece of software. So here's a really important thing to get. AJAX isn't one single technology. You can't just go download AJAX. It's more like a recipe, a new way of thinking that cleverly combines a bunch of technologies that were already there. The name itself, asynchronous JavaScript and XML, hints at the main ingredients. So let's break down that recipe. First, you've got your standard HTML and CSS for how things look. Then there's the document object model, the DOM, which is basically what lets JavaScript reach in and change things on the page after it's already loaded. The data format was originally XML, but today you're almost always going to see JSON. But the real star of the show, the engine, is the XML HTTP object. And of course, JavaScript is the glue that holds it all together. Yeah, this thing right here, the XMLX object, or just XHR for short, is the absolute heart of AJAX. It's a built-in browser object that gives your code the power to open up a line to the server and exchange data without having to do a full page refresh. This is the magic. So how do you use it? Well, it has a few key methods. The two you'll see every single time are open and send. Open is where you set up the request. You tell it if it's a GET or a POST and what URL you're trying to talk to. Then send is what actually fires it off to the server. Okay, so you've sent the request, now what? Now you watch its properties to see what's happening. And the most important property by far is ready state. It's just a number that tells you the status. It goes from 0 for not started all the way up to 4, which means all done. Once you're at 4, you know the server's response has arrived, and you can grab it from the response text property. So the whole process is event-driven. Your code just kind of hangs out. It sets up a listener and waits for that ready state property to change. Once it hits 4, boom, that's the signal. It means the server has answered and the data's back. Then it's just a quick sanity check. Is the HTTP status code 200 for OK? If yes, you're good to go. You can grab that data and do whatever you need with it. But of course, with great power comes great responsibility and security restrictions. This powerful new tool came with a huge catch, something called the same origin policy. Basically, to keep things safe, browsers decided that a script running on your website can only make these background requests to your own server. And this diagram shows that problem perfectly.
Let's say your app running on your domain tries to make a direct XHR call to an API on some other domain. The browser just steps in and says, nope, not allowed, and blocks the request. It's a fundamental security rule of the web. For years, the standard way around this was to use your own server as a middleman, a proxy. Your browser makes a perfectly fine same origin request to your server. Then your server, which doesn't have these browser restrictions, turns around and makes the request to the third-party API. It gets the data and just passes it back down to the browser. It works, but, it adds extra steps and complexity. The modern solution is much, much better. It's called CORS, which stands for Cross-Origin Resource Sharing. This is essentially a system where the remote server can say, hey, it's cool, I trust requests coming from that other domain. It does this by adding a special HTTP header to its response. If the browser sees that permission slip, it lets the request go through. Simple as.
Now, the XML object was the foundation for all of this. And hey, it still works today. But you probably shouldn't be using it directly in new code. The core idea, asynchronous requests, is more vital than ever, but the tools we use have gotten a whole lot better.
And today's successor to XHR is the Fetch API. It accomplishes the exact same thing, making asynchronous requests, but it does it with a much cleaner, more modern syntax based on promises. Instead of listening for ready state changes, you just use a .then block to handle the response. It's way more readable and just easier to reason about. When you step back and look at it, the principles that AJAX brought to the table were nothing short of revolutionary. I mean, they're what turned the web from a library of static documents into a platform for real dynamic applications. It totally reset our expectations for what the web could be. And it really makes you wonder, right? What's the next big shift that's going to come along and change everything all over again?